It is a little past 8 o'clock. Time to conduct the business of Wayne County Board of Commissioners. This is a special meeting to work on the budget. Anyone in the audience, if you have your cell phone, please put it on silent mode or either cut it off.
Well, I reckon I better do that too.
I think we all might better. And Mr. Mayo, would you open with an invocation, please?
I sure will, thank you. Let's bow our heads. Father, we're thankful, Father, that we're able to come together this morning to represent the citizens of Wayne County. Father, we count it a privilege to be here, and Father, the confidence that our citizens have in our leadership as a Board of Commissioners. Father, as we look at this budget today and look at the county in total, that Father, that our decisions may be based upon what you would have us to do, and that we would hide behind you this morning, that the people will see more of you and less of us. Thank you, Father, for this country that we live in, for the people that keep us safe each and every day. Thank you for this time again together. These things I ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Pate, will you do the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just for the record, Commissioner John Bell called to him this morning. As some of y'all know, he works with the criminal justice side, and he's had something to come up this morning that has got to be taken care of, so it's the reason he's not here. But he informed me that he supports whatever the rest of the board acts on this morning.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor.
I just want to let the board know I have a health board meeting at 11:30, so I may be leaving a little early.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Wood, we get started.
Well, good morning. What you have is 4 documents before you. So I'd like to just go over those real quick, and then we'll get into it. The first one, of course, is the budget, proposed budget. In the left-hand pocket of that, you have the school's budget. And it's about 22 pages. It's far more detailed than we've gotten in the past. It is a much improved format, and I would encourage you to read through that in its entirety. It has a budget message. It goes over the major issues they're facing and that sort of thing. But you have that. Then, of course, you have the budget document. The other major document we're going to go over today is the capital improvements plan. You should have that in front of you. The last thing is when we were discussing the outside agencies, I believe Ed had requested that all of the requests for outside agencies, that every member of the board would get those. So this big book, there's nothing else in there. There's no writing from me or anything. This is just what people submitted based on our new format, the information we requested. So everybody has all the information. One thing I did want to mention to you is we showed 15 tabs, but there are also 5 more in the back. We simply ran out of tabs, so don't skip the last 5. There's stuff back there too. Okay. But we're not going to go into that today unless y'all want to. I figured that'd be for the work session, but I wanted y'all to have all the information today so you could take it home and read it at your leisure. So what we plan on going over in more detail today is our budget, the capital improvements program, and then I really don't plan on saying too much about the school's budget. I think just for y'all to read through that. We'll be actually talking about theirs as part of ours in terms of what we fund for them. But that's really about it. If y'all would turn to our budget, the proposed budget, under the Reader's Guide to the Budget, I think I'd like to start there.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Could I, before we go into that, could I ask a question on the outside agencies request? When we have the work session, will there be any representatives here from any of those groups?
They will actually come, you have a public hearing on the 2nd, and they have all been given a letter saying what we are recommending, and that if they wish to appeal that they come to the public hearing. Isn't that right, Pam?
Yes, sir.
So they will actually come to the public hearing, Ray,
Okay.
which will be at your June 2nd meeting, will be a public hearing on the budget. Then our first work session is that afternoon.
Okay.
You remember, we scheduled that to say, after our meeting is over, we'll break for lunch, come back, and then we'll go ahead and have our first work session on the
Okay.
budget.
All right, good.
So the work session is not a place for other people to raise questions. The public hearing is the time for people to come in and give you their comments on the budget. And that'll be June 2nd in the
Okay.
morning.
Okay, that brings up another question. When we have our public comment session at the regular Board of Commissioners meeting, we've got a 4-minute time limit. Would that apply at a public hearing?
It's up to the board. The board can make that decision. It wouldn't unless you make that decision.
Well, I would certainly appreciate it if somebody would make a motion to have that 4-minute time limit.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor that we limit the time limit at the public hearing to 4 minutes or any discussion. Do I need to wait for Mr. Darty to get back to call a vote?
Yes.
Huh? Okay. All in favor, show sign of right hand.
I had a question.
Oh, question, okay.
I'm not opposed to 4 minute, but if it could get lengthier than that, from our side, we might need to ask more questions. So if we limit to 4 minutes in the public comment section or during the public hearing, when we go to work session, could we get those people back and re-engage?
If you decide you want to, yes.
I'm okay.
You want to add that to the minute?
Well, I don't need to, but
I
as
don't
long
think,
as
I
that's
don't think you
standard.
need to add that.
No, I don't either.
Because if y'all as a board say, we'd like to have someone back in.
We just want a quick
Yeah.
synopsis from them, and then we can go deeper.
And I'm not asking for this to try to
No.
limit anybody, but we've made a lot of changes in the budget this year. I just don't want this to drag on and drag on and drag on. I mean, if anybody's got any legitimate reasons they want to talk to us, that's fine, but
Well, one thing we might look at is, I mean, I think your intent is that you would limit the,
Right.
because that's at your,
Okay,
so I wouldn't necessarily say we have to wait till the work session on that. If they're here,
Yeah.
once they finish their presentation, they would have 4 minutes for that. If you want to
Okay.
go ahead and ask questions, I mean, is that your intent?
That's
'Cause
it.
that
That's
to
what
me
I would like
be
to
the time
do.
to do
And-
that.
Presentation.
And really, I'm not concerned about the 4 minutes with the different agencies presenting it, but if it's a public hearing, anybody can speak, and I'm just,
Yeah.
cut your recorder off. I've had some phone calls, or we've had some phone calls that just go on and on and on, and we go on for an hour. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I mean, I don't want to keep anybody from saying what they want to say, but some of us sometimes say too much too long. I'm just trying to be as polite as I can.
And I agree with that. It sort of keeps everybody on subject and we don't get off on a tangent. But I have some questions on the different nonprofits that I need answered, and I like the idea of being able to ask questions during the public hearing if they have a representative.
Yeah, if they come and make a presentation, I don't know if we need to change the motion, but I think your intent.
That's it. That's what we need.
just so we're clear.
Okay.
Okay, you got that? And we can vote on issues today, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I have a motion, Mr. Gurley.
I'm voting for it.
Oh.
Let's go.
All in favor, give a sign of right hand. Motion carries. Okay, now move on.
All right, we're ready to go. If you look at the Reader's Guide, just a quick overview there. This explains our governmental fund structure. We'll have 24 separate funds. If you go to the second page of it, you see the list of funds. I'd like to briefly go through those. We have the general fund, of course, that's our main fund. And you'll see in the far right columns, you have fiscal year 15 budget, fiscal year 16 budget. Where it says current and current, that means that fund is in the current budget and it will be in the next year's current budget, okay? Then, as y'all recall, we use 10 general fund subsidiary funds. And, you know, the way some counties would set this up, all of those would just be put into the general fund. Our finance director prefers to pull them out. I'm in agreement with her on that. It helps her to do some of the annual reports and quarterly reports we have to do. And as we say throughout the budget on all 10 of those funds, at the end of the year, when you look at your audit, all 10 of those funds get subsumed into the general fund in the audit, okay? So we break them out here. The reason they're indented is to make it clear they are actually a part of the general fund. So is everybody clear on that? Okay. The next area of funds or category of funds is special revenue funds. And there we have the emergency telephone system fund, the fire districts fund, and that's where all the fire districts are located there. And we have 3 new funds that we just created really about 3 or 4 months ago, and that is the 3 street lighting district funds. And so they're all there. The capital projects funds, you'll notice, are not in this budget. I list them so that you're clear about that. But the project ordinances, remember, I mean, they're done by project ordinance, and that's why it says project ord. And what that means is you will not have a budget in here for them because they're done by project ordinance, and those ordinances, you recall, last until the project's completed. So, for instance, the one on the Agriculture Center project, that may go on for several years. Well, I know. We're already into it, and we'll be into it again July 1, you know, so for that kind of thing. The next thing in governmental accounting is a category called debt service funds. You don't have to have those. We don't use that. And the reason we put none is we pay our debt service out of the general fund for general county.
What page you guys on? I apologize.
Joe, no problem. We're under the Reader's Guide, the second page.
Oh, okay, well,
I'm just going through the list of funds here.
Okay.
We're down to the debt service fund.
okay.
The next category is proprietary fund types, and we have 5 enterprise funds. They're the Emergency Medical Services Fund, the Solid Waste Disposal Fund, the Sewer Fund, and this year we have closed the non-emergency medical transportation fund into the EMS fund. We had talked about that, had discussions about that, and I think we agreed that we would just put those in. Now, as we get to that fund, you'll see the revenues and the expenditures are still segregated out. So for purposes of financial analysis, we can come back to you and say NEMT cost us this, EMS division cost us that. So it's set up as 2 separate divisions, but we've subsumed it into one fund. Okay, everybody clear on that? And then the next one is the airport fund. Then we have 3 internal service funds. They're the workers' compensation fund, the hospital or medical and self-insurance fund, and we're adding a new fund we talked about this year, and that's fleet management. We're going to break that out as a separate fund. And then the last fund that you have a budget for is the Law Enforcement Separation Allowance Fund. And this is under a category of fiduciary fund types, and it's agency funds. And agency funds are just where we hold the money for other people. And so this is the Law Enforcement Separation Allowance Fund. It really is like a pension fund that we set up for law enforcement officers. So those are the funds that we'll have in the overall budget. That is the complete budget for you. And before we get into the county manager's budget message, the next tab after that is called Summary Budgets, All Funds. I'm not going to go into all the details there, but if you go to the second page, you'll see that basically we have every fund listed there in summary form.
Well, summary.
It's a summary form, okay, and it goes on for about 5 pages. And so I'm not going to take any time to go through that because we're going to go through each fund individually. But I wanted you to see that, so if you want to look at it in summary, that's it. All right?
I've lost you. Where you at? Where are you at?
The tab right after it.
After the budget message, it
Budget, next one.
says summary budgets, all
Okay.
runs.
Well, where is it on yours? Summary.
Right here.
There it is.
Okay?
Okay, I had skipped one.
And now, if y'all will, let's go back to the budget message. I'd like to go through the main points on that, because that really gives you the assumptions that the budget's built on, and also what I considered the major issues that we needed to deal with and that we discussed at our budget retreat. So if you go to the first page of the budget message, about midway down, you'll see budget assumptions. So as I say in here, in preparing the budget, you have to use several assumptions because the budget by definition is a planning document and not every issue is determined, so you have to use certain assumptions putting it together. I like to list those because then if those circumstances change, then we know it's no longer applicable and we need to revisit that particular assumption and whether it impacts us. The first thing, and what everybody wants to know, is it assumes that the ad valorem property tax rate will decrease from the current year's 66.65 cents per $100 to 66.5 cents. That's a small decrease, but we were able to do that. That's equal to roughly $104,000 decrease in tax revenue. It assumes a 4.4% growth in the 3 local option sales taxes over fiscal year 15 and a 1.76% growth in the property tax base. Both are an improvement over the last few years. So while it's not back up to where you would normally be in, normal economic times, it is an improvement over what we've been seeing.
Could I inquire on that? The 4.4% growth, don't
Yeah.
you think that's rather aggressive?
It is if you don't put it in context. What it means is the sales tax came in better this year than we planned last year. So your base, actually, it's starting at a higher number. So I'm playing catch-up with the growth I didn't include last year.
So you're not expecting the
Oh,
economy
no,
to grow
no, 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 no.
4.4%?
No, I would be ecstatic if that were continuous.
I would too.
I hope so.
But that's what that is. That's
It's
a
a
catch-up.
catch-up. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You'll also have regular meetings before you Tuesday to anticipate more sales tax, which will go more to the schools and more to the fire departments. So that budget amendment is coming Tuesday for this year.
Right, okay.
But all of these comparisons I give you are to the amended 15 budget. And I want to explain that. We don't compare to the original 15 budget because what you're really comparing to is what is it taking to run the county in fiscal year 15? And the most objective thing is, what has it taken? Well, what it's taken is what we've had to amend the budget during the year. Because as y'all know, we get health insurance. I mean, several of y'all are on the health board. We get money on that about monthly. DSS, it trickles in different times. You have different things that come up. We get more grants than we anticipated, things like that. The sheriff gets the money from the concealed weapons permits, things like that. So we include all of that and then we compare to that and say, what do we need in 16 compared to what's it taking in 15 to run the county? Okay, so I want to be clear about that. All right. This assumes no increase in any fees associated with the sewer system. It assumes that adequate available fund balances will be maintained in all operating funds. The budget will be adopted and accounted for using the modified accrual basis of accounting. The enterprise and internal service funds will be reported in the annual audit using full accrual accounting similar to private businesses. Now, I just want to remind you of that. Under North Carolina law for budgeting, the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act, North Carolina law requires that all funds be budgeted on modified accrual, which is similar to cash, instead of full accrual. And then but to be compliant with the national standards for governmental accounting policies, or GAAP, you have to convert enterprise and internal service funds to full accrual. And the auditor comes in and they work with our finance department, and you'll see in the audit, you have the non-GAAP, which means as budgeted, then they show a conversion in the audit to full accrual on that. It's a little bit confusing, but I just wanted you to know that's not necessarily by our choice, that's how North Carolina law requires it. Let's see. It assumes that all full-time employees working at least a 40-hour week would be given a continuation of the $500 bonus granted last year. All part-time employees would get an amount prorated based upon their hours compared to the standard 40-hour week. In other words, we've just continued that bonus, because if you don't, then people would get a pay cut on there. It assumes that all full-time employees will be formally evaluated in July and August and be eligible for a merit increase. I'm recommending that the merit pay pool be set at 2%, and this budget includes $600,000 in a contingency line item for that purpose. This is in keeping with the new position classification and pay plan policies which you adopted in May. I might point out that the House, the state's not through with their budget, but the House budget is also recommending 2% increases.
Mr. Doherty.
On these, I want to make sure I'm not confused here. On the 600,000, that is for
Salaries and benefits.
It is salaries and benefits.
Yes. Because remember, we said whatever you do, it affects the fringes.
Well, we just got to be real careful that we back out the benefits so that
On the spreadsheet that she'll prepare, it will be.
okay, it'll be broken
It'll
out.
be
So
broken
people
out.
know it may be 1.7% or
Oh,
whatever.
no, it'll be at 2%, but the fringe benefits that are affected are also included in this pool. So the 600 covers it all,
Covers it all.
covers it all. Because remember, we have to budget for the full impact. And the full
Well, I agree.
The full impact is salaries and wages, plus about 5 fringe benefits that are tied to salaries and wages.
Well, just make sure I'm understanding.
Okay.
If I give a raise of 2% to Ray,
Right.
then that effectively, with the benefits, would run about 30% more, so 2.6% would be the total impact to my budget.
Yeah,
Right?
if your 30% is correct, that's correct.
So you,
And 600,000 is for the worst case scenario that you may or may not use all that.
That's
right?
Well, that's right.
Okay.
And if you have vacancies, you would.
Well, some people may not get a merit.
Well, that's right. Remember, this is a pool
Okay.
that department
We'll be
head will
clear.
have to work with. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I just want to clarify, but at any point, we have a breakdown. We have a breakdown of what benefits are versus the pay increase, the merit pay increase. We know, we can separate, that will be
Well,
separated.
yeah, for instance, we know that FICA, you know what FICA is.
Yeah.
That's 7.65%,
Right.
right? That's FICA Medicare. We know that for our non-law enforcement people, we pay roughly 7% into the North Carolina retirement system, okay, for them. What else is tied to salary? 401K?
401K, retirement,
There's about 5 items.
Mhm.
So I think 30 may be a little high. What I'm saying, not for fringe benefits in general, but health insurance is not tied to salary. It's a fixed dollar amount. So if you give a 2% increase, that doesn't go up. And that's probably the largest fringe benefit we have. So you're probably looking at somewhere around 18 to 20% is what I'm thinking.
And we
Okay?
also took in consideration that certain departments like DSS would have reimbursements coming back. So the spreadsheet that was done includes all that information. We put the percentages to it
so
also.
as we give a raise to an employee that their position is paid for by the state or federal government.
It doesn't cost us the full amount.
Okay, all right.
That makes
And we've, you've got a good finance director. She's accounting for all that stuff.
I have a good staff.
Well, I just found it hard to believe that you could do that for 600,000.
Well, it's right. It's better, you know, it's better than what I thought it was gonna be too. I'm very pleased with it.
Okay.
Okay. Then the next one is, it assumes that 300,000 will be used to adjust some underpaid positions as determined by salary studies. As y'all recall, that's the second pool we talked about, and we'll be coming to you during the year. And remember, you will vote on those, because we can't change that classification and compensation plan without a resolution by you. So if we come back and say, you know, this particular position, we say it's 5% low and we want to go from grade 60 to 61, you're going to vote on that. And before you do that, we'll tell you the financial impact annually is X on this, and this is what it'll take. Okay. It assumes that employees who achieve certain work-related certifications will be eligible for 2.5% increases during the fiscal year. Now, we have not implemented a list yet. We're working on that, but I think we've discussed that in the past. We would like to have a list of pre-approved raises. For instance, if you go from basic EMT to an EMT intermediate, if we don't give them a raise, if we don't give them something for that certification, we're probably going to lose them. And if they go from intermediate to paramedic and you don't do something, we're going to lose. So now sometimes it'll be a full promotion. Other times it would just be a step on the grade. But we do that already on some positions. What I prefer is I want the board to vote on a list in a resolution so that we know this is the only ones who get that if they get this specific certification.
And if I might say that there's been a lot of problems with that in the past, where a person was hired in one position with an agreement that once they got that certification, they would get the raise, and were not able to get the raise because it was considered a raise. Well, that's not really a raise. That's an agreement that you had with that employee to give automatically a jump in.
And that's why instead of coming back every time or doing it ad hoc, I want, what most places do is they have the board pass by resolution, and then we put it basically in our personnel policies that says the following positions, if they, you know, when you get this particular certification, you go. And I want to be clear about that. I've told the department heads, I'm not talking about every time somebody attends a 3-day course at the LGC that we're doing this. You know, we're talking about major certifications. Another example would be our inspectors. You know, if you don't take them up, now that may not be a good example, 'cause that's actually a promotion, but the theory's the same. If you don't take them up and you keep them at that entry level, somebody's going to grab them because they've become more valuable in the marketplace, and if we don't do it. Now, one thing, and I don't recall if I put it in here specifically, one of these that the sheriff's recommending, and I'm recommending you approve, is, even before we do this, is we believe our SWAT team should get a 2.5% certification for this. There's an awful lot of extra training that goes into that. They serve warrants, as y'all know, on some of the worst offenders that we have and things like that. Most places give an added amount of money for people while they're on the SWAT team. Now, if they come off, then it goes back down. So I've included that money in here and I'm recommending that y'all approve that one. But the rest of them, I think we'd like to wait until Tommy and Geraldine and I can finish up going down this list and bring that to you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I
Mayor.
have a question. We also will have some information and regulations as far as when a person, for instance, gets a college degree. Okay? Is that?
Well, you can do that. I would say that would be part of the details. I'm not a proponent of doing it just because they get a college degree. I mean, if you get a degree in sociology and you're a chemist, that doesn't benefit us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let me make myself clear. A college degree related to the field that they are working in.
Then I think you could look at that.
Like as a machinist, for example.
Right.
You know, if a machinist goes to Wayne Community College and decides he wants to take a year training course.
Right.
And learn how to program and all this stuff, then obviously that has to do with his, I'm not talking about a
Right.
machinist going for an accounting degree.
Right. Well, no,
We
that,
don't-
and that's
not-
what we're talking about
Yeah,
here. If
yeah.
it's work-related, but again, we want to have all those things spelled out in the resolution, and then, it's not ad hoc. We're all playing by the same rules, and the department heads know it, and the employees know it in that particular department, that
Right.
these are the things for which you would be paid extra.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
2.5% bullet there ties back into the one previous, about 300,000.
Not necessarily, Joe, because that would be, what we're trying to do there is have a policy that says if you reach those on an individual basis, so you wouldn't really be reclassifying the position, you would just be moving them further along in that grade.
So are you going to establish a dollar amount for this one too?
Yeah, and typically it's done as a percentage,
Right.
but, we won't any longer have the steps, but it would just be that percentage
Okay.
of the salary.
Sure, I'm good.
Okay.
Well, let's back up a little bit further. So what we're saying is, the 2% increase that we're looking at 600,000. In the paragraph right under it, we're looking at another 300,000. And then we're looking at, another 2.5%,
Just for certain
for
employees.
certifications. So, initially, when I just saw the 600,000, I was thinking, with the number of employees we got, that's not a whole lot. But when you add all of them together, we're really giving a pretty decent pay increase.
We are, but remember, not everybody's gonna
I
get,
understand that.
okay. But you're right, somebody could get 2% merit increase, they could get a grade reclassification.
And also the $500 bonus that we give last year. I mean, all of that
Yeah.
plays into it. So
Right.
we're looking well over $1 million.
Yeah.
When you add all these different
Right.
columns together.
That's right.
Well, that was my thoughts sort of, as I looked at this. It looks a little sweeter than maybe it did. It does make it, when you add the fact that they're getting a $500 bonus.
Yeah.
Because if you factor that out per employee, what kind of percent would that be? Do you have an idea?
Well, we've got it in the budget in the departments that are going to get reimbursements. And in the, part that is just in the general fund, just the general fund, 110, came to 167,000, I believe it is.
Okay, so we're looking,
Round two.
we're looking at,
Yeah.
that $600,000 figure is kind of deceiving. I mean, it's going,
It's about $1 million.
It's about $1 million,
Yeah.
and what we're doing is, we're putting the bulk of it into the merit increase system. Then we're putting 300,000 into where we know we've got positions that are underfunded that we need to get up. And then, as you say, we've got to continue the bonus, because if we don't do the bonus, then basically
They
the raise
gotta
you
pay
gave
good.
last year would go away,
yeah.
So,
Well, and if I don't want to belabor this point, but, I think this, one, I want to make sure everyone's aware that these employees have not been getting raises, because it's been several years that they got none. Last year, all we could do was to apply the $500, but this year, we're actually having a pool of 2%, up to 2% based upon merit.
that's right.
So I think we're trying to move our employees up as best we can.
Well, you make a good point. I think it was for the 3 years previous to that, there was nothing. So we are taking all of that into account on
And
this.
the recognition of those additional certifications, I think that's really important, because those people have been left behind.
Agreed.
And,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so
go
we'll,
along with what he's saying.
okay.
That's why I think it's important, that 300,000, because we knew we have discrepancies in pay. But keep in mind, if this is taken care of during this budget year, that 300,000 probably won't be there next budget year. And once we get everybody's pay where it needs to be.
Yeah, but I want to be clear now, $300,000 is not going to solve all those problems. It's going to take multiple years of getting that up.
Okay, so you're taking a little at a time, Okay, I
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah, you couldn't,
I don't know the magnitude of that, okay?
it's,
You do.
well, it's bigger than 300,000.
Okay, all right.
We wouldn't have a slight tax decrease, it would be a major increase.
Yeah, I, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm taking it in increments.
Okay, I got you.
But I think to
Okay.
clear up Ray's comment was that 300,000 will be in next year's budget, because once you establish it, part of this year's budget, it will always be there the
Correct.
following year.
Correct. Now, what should happen is when we get growth each year in the sales tax and property tax, that helps offset some of these inflationary increases. And further along in these assumptions and major issues, I'm gonna talk with you about that. Because we had to eat some major expenditures this year that next year, hopefully, they won't be new. And so when that growth comes in next year, we should hopefully have some more freed up money. And I'm gonna go over that with you, okay? Okay, I think we're down to, there'll be a 7% increase in the county's portions of medical insurance premiums for the PPO and the HSA plan. A 6.4% increase will also apply to employee shares of the premium cost, and that's what you just talked about at your last meeting. It was unavoidable. And in fact, we're coming to you with another budget amendment because we've had added costs this year over and above what we budgeted. So we are not having a good year, as I told you at the last meeting. Assumes that the premium set aside in the workers' comp fund will remain at $480 per employee. Assumes that the maximum deduction allowed in employees' flexible spending accounts will remain at $2,500 for medical and $5,000 for child care. Assumes the economy will improve somewhat for all of the fiscal year. Register of Deeds filings are showing an increase, as are building permits. And the growth rate for sales tax and property taxes have shown an improvement over recent years. Now, the property tax is showing an improvement, but some of that is also where we had been conservative and it came in better than we planned. So we're catching that up some too. It assumes that inflation will remain in the same low range as recent years, except for food. Revenues were projected from a scale of high, medium, and low within the medium range, so they're realistic but not overly optimistic or pessimistic. It's always better if we come in and we take in revenues a little bit more than we budgeted. You know, the worst thing I could do is come back to you and say, revenues aren't coming in as projected and we've got to cut back mid-year or use fund balance.
Let me make a comment on that, because that's a big statement, because some of the criticism has been that you overestimate expenditures and underestimate revenue, and so therefore anybody's gonna come within budget. You follow me? In other words,
Yeah.
if you are extremely conservative on your revenues and you overestimate your expenditures in a budget, then undoubtedly you should be able to come in with a surplus.
Right.
But you're using
I try to go medium.
Medium.
I try to go medium, because you're right. If you're too conservative on revenues,
Right.
then you're gonna come in with a surplus. And
Right.
if you're too conservative on your expenditures, you'll do them higher than you typically would and kind of pad it a little bit. Then, like you said, you're gonna come in with a bigger surplus.
Well, I just wanted to compliment you on the fact that you're in the medium
Yeah,
range.
well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Assumes that some of the proprietary funds will require transfers from the general fund. Assumes that fuel will average $3 per gallon on the open market. And just to remind you, the county pays about 50 cents less due to its fuel and sales tax exemptions. So we have a benefit there of being tax exempt. It assumes the 2007 legislation eliminating any county responsibility for Medicaid payments after October 1, 2009 remains in effect. This has eliminated our cost for Medicaid in the Department of Social Services budget, but the trade-off was we lost the Article 44 half-cent sales tax revenue, and that has been one of the best deals NCACC ever negotiated, getting out of Medicaid, because y'all know that has, since 2009, that has skyrocketed. And if counties still paid a percentage of that, it would be eating our lunch. It assumes that the state budget will negatively impact the Board of Education, Department of Social Services, and the Public Health Department. However, our budget will be enacted before we know exactly how the state budget turns out. Now, it is looking better in recent days, as y'all know, because they went from they were looking at a deficit, now they're looking at a 400,000 surplus in the current year, which also means their base starts at a higher point, and things should be better for next year. But there's still, when you get to the Board of Education's budget, you look at DSS and Public Health, they're still making some cuts on some things. It's just not as bad as it's been in recent years. It assumes that the state budget will not return any portion of either the lottery proceeds or the ADM funding that the state has seized over the last 5 or 6 years to balance its budget. However, it also assumes that the current level of funding will not be further cut. And with them having better news, we're not hearing any comments about taking our lottery funds. Now, Representative Bell has been trying to come up with a method of restoring some of those lottery funds. And, you know, my personal opinion is the only way we're going to be able to do that is to incrementally do it. You're not going to get it all back in one budget. But ideally, that's where we need to get to. Okay. And it assumes that the full financing costs for Grantham Middle School and Spring Creek Middle School will begin this year, increasing our debt service expenses by $1,053,913. So out of our growth in revenues this year, that was a huge one-time expense we're having to eat. So next year, when you come in on your budget, that's already built into the budget. So as you have revenue growth next year, a lot of it won't be eaten up on a one-time big item like that. So let's go to the major issues. Number one, just talking about the economy in general. I'm not going to read through all of that. Basically, the unemployment rate is down, but if you look at the labor participation rate, it's probably the worst in 30 years, according to the
Mr. Chairman,
statistics.
I'm sorry. Can I go back to this
Sure.
Spring Creek School? I thought our agreement was that it was gonna be around 750.
Well, if you remember, that's when we were capping everything at 2.9 on the operating lease. What we ended up with was that they agreed to pay $2.2 million
Right.
over the 20 years, and you pay the difference.
Right.
And so the first few years, you'll pay more than it'll be
Oh,
more
oh,
than
that's
2.9, but later on, you'll pay a whole lot less.
That's right.
So we've got-
LGC required us to increase the front end cost.
They like level
Level
principal.
Level principal.
So instead of having a level full payment, it was level principal, so it'll be higher in the early years, then it declines. And if you want to look at that further, I don't want to take your time now, but you can look in the appendix on the debt service schedules for schools, and you'll see it over that 20-year period is the principal payment will stay the same, the interest payment will decline every year.
All right, so your budget, as I'm seeing it so far, it was a slight decrease, but yet at the same time, we're giving raises, and we're also increasing the cost by this $1 million for these two schools that
That's
we're
right.
folding in.
So if you take that and about $1 million on raises, that's about $2 million right there.
Okay, so far,
Okay.
thank you.
So the major issues, just talking about, again, the economy, I think we can skip over the rest of that. One thing I did want to mention is with the Federal Reserve Board's low interest rate, that does hurt us on the revenue side, because as y'all know, we have a considerable amount of reserves, and in normal times, we would be getting 3, 4, 5% on CDs, things like that. We're restricted on what we can invest in. Right now, it's irrelevant, because whatever you invest in, you're not getting anything. But in normal times, this county used to get in excess of $1 million a year. Now you're getting what, 50,000?
50,000.
So the Federal Reserve Board is costing us almost $1 million a year in revenue.
I heard of a bank that was actually charging you to park your money in their
Yeah.
bank.
Chase. They've been doing, in Switzerland, they've been doing it for several years now.
Right.
Actually, but
Right.
Chase Bank is here.
It's bad that you gotta
Charging
pay
you.
somebody to keep your money.
That's right. I just wanted to mention that because, you know, when times come, if times ever get what we consider normal again, you know, there's $1 million in revenue that's going to suddenly appear. Okay. We talk about the state budget a little bit. We do see consumer spending is seeing an improvement. So number two, I want to talk about the property tax rate. Again, we're recommending a decrease from the current rate of 66.65 cent to 66.5 cent. It's based on growth of 1.76%. It's also based on, I believe it's 97.27% collection rate the first year. As we always do, if you'd look at the next page, this is a chart that I give you each year. We try to compare us in two ways. One is we want to show you the neighboring counties. How does Wayne County stack up to neighboring counties? And you'll see that, now these numbers are from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and you will see that this is the 14 property tax rate. And so, and remember, the property tax rate is for that calendar year. So this is the property tax rate that people will have paid last September through December, okay? Craven County is the lowest, and I think you can see why. They are lower than us. They're, if you look at the assessed value per capita, they have a tax base of $93,807 per person. We have $62,000. So if you apply the same tax rate, they take in almost a third, over a third more than we do. Is everybody, we're 2/3 of them. So that's why they're lower. We are then lower than every other one of our neighboring counties. And I'm using the current rate because that's what was in the that's what was in effect that year. So that's the neighboring counties. Then what we compare to is, well, looking across the state of North Carolina, what about counties in our population class? As y'all know, we're about 100 and, what does it say we are? 125, almost 126,000, so mid-range of that. So we look at 100 to 150,000 population. There are 5 that are lower than us, and I give you an explanation on why that is, but the bulk of it is, look at the tax basis. Brunswick County is off the chart. I mean, if you have a tax base of $211,000 per capita, you know, you can have a 44-cent tax rate compared to our $62,000 per capita. They're 3.5 times our tax base is what it amounts to. Craven County, we've already talked about. Henderson is a big retiree population. Rowan County is just a little, so, and then Orange County, again, is off the chart. But they have a good tax base, but they have the highest tax rate because they want everything.
I was going to say, that's my balance.
But they're willing to pay for it, you know, so if they want to pay for it, that's their business. Does anybody have any questions on that survey?
I think that makes us look pretty good.
I think we look real good, yeah. Number 3, funding for public education continues to be a large expense for the county. I'd ask you to see the discussion notes in both the Wayne County Public Schools current expense and capital outlay. We will be going into detail on that later in the presentation, so I'm not going to waste your time here with that. Then we talk about the lottery funds. Again, what I've given you there is some historical data about what that has meant to us. And the only thing I'd like to stress there is that between the ADM and the lottery, if you look at the last years when we had full amounts from both, this reduction to Wayne County, the loss of these funds to Wayne County for the construction or renovation of its schools has been $2,541,000 annually. And I just want to stress that because state government basically has taken that money to balance its budgets through the last 5 or 6 years, and that's the impact it's had on this county. So imagine where we would be from a tax rate standpoint and everything else if that had not happened, if they had kept the lottery like it was supposed to and kept the ADM in place. $2.5 million annually.
That buys some schools, doesn't it?
Yes. I've got, just to remind you, bear in mind that the Board of Education is committed to using $2.2 million annually of lottery funds and the local option sales tax proceeds reserved for schools to help repay the $38,400,000 debt service on the Grantham Middle School and Spring Creek Middle School. If any portion of lottery funds are taken back, then Wayne County will have a shortfall in this funding source. But again, as we're seeing it now, I think the state's in good enough shape. I'm not hearing of any threats against the lottery money at this point. Number 5, this budget funds a continuation of the $500 bonus given last year to each full-time employee. We've already talked about that. Number 6, a new position classification and pay plan was adopted in May 2015. This budget implements both of the key components, and we've already just talked about that in great detail, but we've set aside those in 2 contingency line items in here. And if you want to know where those 2 line items are, Pam, they're under central services, isn't that right?
110-4200, and it is titled Central Services.
Okay. Okay, in fiscal year 2015, we were able to decrease our medical insurance premiums by 6%. If you recall, both our premiums and those that employees paid. And unfortunately, this year, we're having to go back up on employees to 6.4, so they're kind of back roughly where they were. And ours has gone up 7%. Okay. This budget does contain the recommended elimination of some positions and the addition of some others. Those recommended positions are listed: a reduction in force, a public information and marketing manager, 1 environmental health inspector, 3 positions in DSS, and if you recall, those were discussed as part of the Northwoods project, which has helped pay for that. Additional positions, 1 IT analyst who will work for the IT director but be assigned to the sheriff's office. 2 call takers for the E911 center. Remember, those are positions less than a full telecommunicator, but they're designed to help screen the calls and reduce some of that volume there. And those are the last positions we can shoehorn in there, because we're having to take that 7th position, that 7th chair, and put these people in there. We can't do anything more until we find out about the grant. And as of today, we have not heard on the grant. Okay. 1 part-time to full-time administrative assistant, 1 in the Veterans Affairs Office. Bill and I have been monitoring that all year. The new director is recommending that go to full-time. As y'all know, we've had an issue about when people come in, whether they're being greeted and served and all of that. And so we feel like that's a small amount to pay to get that straightened out.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
It's sort of, that position sort of shares the responsibility for both sides of that operation, the literacy and the vets.
Well, they can point out where they are,
Okay,
but
okay.
they will answer to the Veterans
Okay,
Office.
but I was gonna say if they were having to share supervision, then
No.
financial.
No, they will
Should
be
be shared as
supervised,
well.
they'll be supervised by the Veterans
Okay.
Affairs Officer. Okay. I've never seen a split supervision work.
I hope not.
They, they
I
play
just
one
wanted to
on.
be sure.
Right.
That's a no-brainer, that just won't work.
We have 1 recycling materials handler in solid waste department, and I'll go into detail on that in the solid waste thing. And then this is the big one, 28 detention officer positions for the new satellite jail. And so the net effect is they had 28 positions, and that's the jailers. So we've cut as many positions as we've added, except for the jailers. Now, what we're doing with the jailers is the sheriff feels like they need to be trained for about 6 months before the new jail opens. And of course, they'll be trained in the current jail. And the issue for us is that's a pretty high expense because, when we open the new jail, we won't be having to farm out these people, and we'll save that $900,000. But this first 6 months, we won't have the new jail open. So this is a one-time added cost in our budget. Now, we may be able to feather this over 2 fiscal years. And what I mean by that is, we're assuming, I believe it's 5 months here. If the jail doesn't open until August or September, we can do fewer months in this fiscal year and save some money, but we would have some added cost in the next fiscal year. But he wants about 6 months to get these people trained, and I agree with that. You can't just open a new jail and, have people with virtually no training in there.
they've got to work with our seasoned people over here. And of course, what he's gonna do is send a mix down there. It's not gonna be all new people. It's gonna be some seasoned people, and of course, there'll be some promotions and all.
And really, he's going to have to retrain some of his people he's already got.
Pardon me?
He's going to have to retrain some of the people he's already got,
Yeah.
because this is going to be an entirely different jail than what they're being used to working in.
It is, and the way we're getting 28 is that's 7 per shift, and y'all remember it's 4 12-hour shifts to go around the clock here. So, you're exactly right, they're going to be trained. Tommy just reminded me, about 8 weeks of this is the school they have to go to. So you've got to get them, go through the process of hiring them. We got to get them through that school, get their certification, then we got to get them over here and get them, go through working with current jailers in the current position. And of course, part of that, if y'all recall, our contract with Mosley is, part of that is they'll be going over all of the new facility operations, how everything works and all that, and helping to train them on operating that jail. So.
Go ahead.
I'll be the bad guy here. I just think that's a little excessive. It's not rocket science is here now. I mean, I just think that's a little bit overkill. Now, I understand the 8 weeks of training. I assume they're gonna learn something if they're gonna get trained for 2 months.
Oh, yeah.
But I would certainly think that they could pick that up in a matter of a couple of months.
Yeah, what I would suggest on that is let's have the sheriff come over, he and Fane, and talk with y'all about
He's
that.
probably listening as we are speaking.
Probably.
I'll be right over here. Thank you very
All
much.
kidding aside, I would like him to
Explain all that.
explain that to you and give you his arguments as to why he thinks it's valid.
Very well.
He's convinced me, he may not convince you.
And also, I'm assuming that he's, in his budget, it's not only 28 positions. I mean, all of the equipment, radios, uniforms, tasers, I mean, there's more to it than just 28 positions.
Yeah.
That was.
Those we were gonna have anyway. The concern here is, I wanted you to be aware that we don't have the savings yet to offset this, and you won't have it till we open that jail. When we open them, we can.
I thought that was gonna get to the
That was quick. Okay.
I was gonna ask a question if I could.
Yes,
That
sir.
training, they send them to Salemburg to get trained, is that where they go for jails, or?
I'm not sure, Bill, but that's something we can ask
I'm just
him.
curious, 'cause
I can't remember off the top of my head, but,
that's where they train the
Okay.
prison folks and
Right.
correctional officers.
right.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mann.
This, and I understand why we need 28 detention officers, but when we went on the tour a few months ago of a couple of jails, this is based on, this 28, based on the new designs that's being done with jails to cut down on the number of detention personnel?
Yes, the current jail takes over 70 people to guard 200. We're gonna be handling this one with, then you throw in a couple of supervisors, probably with about 30 people. So you have made a tremendous savings. I mean, none of us likes this cost, but if this had been a traditional jail, you would be looking at double what we're talking about here.
And we're looking at 3 shifts here now. We're not just
Yeah,
looking,
that's
there's not
right.
gonna be 28 people there.
Yeah, this is.
4 shifts. Okay.
This is 24/7, 365 days a year.
I just
4
think
shifts.
it's important that we point that out,
That's
because we are proactive in the design of new jails. They're completely different than what we got here.
I think you have done as cheap as you can in terms of the construction cost and in the operating cost. And as y'all know, we made that very clear to the architect on the front end that operating costs were as important. And he pointed that out, you remember in his presentation, that really the biggest cost is not the cost of the jail, it's in the long-term operating cost. And you can see it here, because if you were paying double on this manpower, the $10 million cost to build it would shrink
Yeah.
compared to that.
Yeah.
So I think you've done a very good job on it. Okay, number 9, The county provided partial funding along with the Impact Wayne in fiscal year 15 to acquire the Cooper Busman building to create an advanced manufacturing center. The building is now owned by the Wayne County Development Alliance, and through a long-term lease for $1, Wayne County Community College, or Wayne Community College, will operate the center. As you recall, in North Carolina, counties provide the facilities and maintenance for community colleges. Consequently, we have anticipated additional operating costs for this new facility. It will be renovated in phases, with Wayne Community College and WCDA seeking grant sources as well as county funding. This budget contains $168,000 for additional operating expenses, and we'll just see the Wayne Community College Fund for further details. I'll get into more there. This is not all that they asked for, but we went through it line item by line item. Everything in this 168 we feel is necessary for them to open it, but these are operating costs. We have not included capital. Impact Wayne is going to go with has $100,000 set aside for that, and they are, Dr. Albertson is pursuing grants now, and so we're waiting to hear back on that, and then we'll move forward with it. But our plan is to do it in phases rather than go through there and spend, all the money up front doing that. And they have worked very well with us on that. I do want to add that. Number 10, the county's made great strides in fiscal year 2015 towards the financing and construction of the Wayne Regional Agricultural and Convention Center. The county and city of Goldsboro announced a recent agreement wherein the city would share its hotel motel accommodations tax with the county for construction and operation of the center. In addition, the city deeded at no cost to the county 12 acres fronting Wayne Memorial Drive, adjacent to Wayne Community College, for the facility. The county agreed to provide $200,000 towards the city's purchase of the Goldsboro Country Club for a recreational amenity, and to loan the city up to $3 million at 1.5% interest for 15 years to aid the construction of the P4 multi-sport complex to be built on 60 acres leased from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. We've been pursuing possible funding sources, as y'all know, including state and federal grants, budget appropriations, a private donor campaign, and bond financing. In addition, we are pursuing USDA loans and grants, and that's through the Tri-County Electric Co-op. The county already has set aside $4 million of savings into a capital projects fund for this project. The architect should have the schematic drawings by mid-July, and in fiscal year 16, we need to complete the plans and secure the necessary financing to bring this $16 million project to fruition. As we get into the CIP portion, I'll be going into more detail on exactly how, right now, we tentatively see the funding going for that. Okay. Number 11, the county this spring received a report from Mission Critical regarding call volumes, staffing levels, and facilities. And due to increased call volumes, we need to add staffing. However, there is no more room for additional consoles in the existing center. We've applied for a state 911 board grant to aid in the construction of a new facility, and we should hear whether we were successful sometime in June. If so, we need to proceed with this building as soon as possible. And again, I go into more detail on the Emergency Telephone System Fund, so you can read about that more there. Now, our assumption in the CIP is that the grant will cover the cost. If it comes back and it covers 90%, then we would need to come up with some money. But I don't know what that'll be at this point. We may get it all. We also have some money in that Emergency Telephone System Fund if we can talk the state into releasing that. And the Facilities Committee has talked about that as well as we pursue this. Number 12, in fiscal year 2015, Facilities Maintenance expanded its servicing of some of the county fleet. For 16, we're recommending this operation be set up as an internal service fund. That would expense the labor charges and parts, thank you, to a department using the garage just like a private garage would. The revenues to operate the garage would come from these charges. This budget contains a new fund, the Fleet Management Fund, to account for this operation. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail as we get to that fund. The county faces a number of added expenses in fiscal year 2016, which exceeded the overall growth in our general fund revenues. Consequently, cutbacks had to be made where possible. Each department head was instructed to save 2.5% from the current budget if possible. Those cuts have been made, if possible, to absorb the following without raising property taxes. I thought you'd like to see this list because these are added costs that we had to cover. $1,053,000 is the debt service we talked about on the 2 new middle schools. $600,000 to implement a $200,000 merit increase pool. $300,000 to implement a pool to adjust underpaid job positions. $168,692 was the increased operating expenses for the new advanced manufacturing center. $211,860 is the increase in employers' medical insurance premiums. So that's our 7% increase. $472,000 is an increase over the normal replacement schedule for ambulances due to age. $142,473 is an increase in expenses to replace cardiac monitors and other equipment for the EMS department. $68,650 is an increase over the normal replacement schedule for sheriff's fleet due to mileage. $234,552 is an increase in expenses for the sheriff's department equipment. And $450,000 is the additional expenses for the 28 detention officers for 6 months. That's a total of $3,702,140. Every bit of that is new expenditures. And some of that y'all knew about because we had planned on it. We knew when we did the Advanced Manufacturing Center we were going to have to increase the operating. We knew the jail costs were going up. So that's where we're at on that.
And are we going to discuss some of these items as we get into the
Oh,
budget?
yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, good enough.
Number 14, the Northwoods project for the Department of Social Services has been approved in fiscal year 2015. This will require some additional funding to start up, but will pay for itself over a 5-year period. This project will allow us to move from paper enrollment and record storage to a fully integrated electronic enrollment process with shared electronic records among departments. It will cut down on the time clients and staff spend filling out applications and other forms and give us electronic searchable databases for record storage so that a complete history of program participation by each client can be readily accessed by staff. Part of the added expense is being offset by canceling current record scanning contracts and the reduction of 3 staff members. Number 15, the county adopted a new policy this spring for the review of funding applications by nonprofit organizations. This resulted in a thorough review of each application by the budgeting staff. In my opinion, the county is getting good service from all of these agencies. However, I have recommendations on 2 agencies for you to consider. A, the Literacy Connections is not tracking whether clients are either citizens of the USA or legally residing in this country. I recommend that you enter into a written contract with this agency that as a condition of county funding, it must develop a policy to provide services only to U.S. citizens and those residing in this country legally. They must also develop a policy to assure this is documented on a monthly basis and submitted to the county. I think that's pretty straightforward. We're basically saying that it needs to provide it to people who are legally in the country.
What's that based on? What decision was made to do that? The only question I have is that the community college, for example, is required whether a person is a citizen or not, they can enroll in a community college. And that's the only question I had is
It comes down to a philosophical thing, if you think taxpayers should pay for
taxpayers
services.
paying for that at
I
one
know,
community.
but that's a state decision.
But still taxpayer money's paying for it.
Right, right,
But the big difference is that's a state decision, this is a county decision.
right. So it's your call.
Yeah.
It's your call. Okay. B, the Watch program is a subsidiary nonprofit organization of Wayne Healthcare Corporation, which owns Wayne Memorial Hospital. This program provides services to patients that cannot pay for medical services, and by providing free clinics, it provides it at a much lower rate than if those patients use the emergency department instead. In reviewing their audit, they have a sizable fund balance built up that far exceeds the contribution we are making, which is $220,000. In addition, the county became aware of language in the 1985 Transfer of Assets Agreement transferring the hospital assets from the county to Wayne Healthcare Corporation, requiring Wayne Healthcare Corporation to provide indigent care to Wayne County, in Wayne County. Consequently, the county has been contributing voluntarily to the support of a program for indigent care that legally is not its responsibility. Given the above, I'm recommending that you not fund Watch in fiscal year 2016. Instead, I've budgeted the $220,000 for the Wayne County Public School System for current expenses. The Board of Education has absorbed a number of significant cuts from state government in recent years and needs more operating money to cover those costs. There are 144 Wayne County Public School System employees that are paid completely from local funds. If the state legislature enacts a budget giving raises, these employees get the raise, but the funding comes from local funds, and local funds means county dollars. That puts still further pressure on the Wayne County Public School System budget. While you have no legal responsibility to fund Watch, you do have a legal responsibility to fund the public education system at an adequate level. Number 16, the Will Sullivan Building.
Wait a minute. We're not gonna go through that fast.
Mr. Dolan.
I think you honed right in on the issue, and I think you worded that very, very well. We are responsible to fund public schools. We are responsible to fund certain functions of government. We are not obligated to fund Watch. Now, even though Watch is a great program, I mean, it is, but it really, in my opinion, rests upon the responsibility of the hospital to provide indigent care. And I think you've done a real good job of explaining all that. Saw an article that was in the paper yesterday. I think it very accurately reflects our concerns and the concerns of the hospital and the Watch. But I really do believe that the hospital will pick up that additional funding and that no clinics will in fact be impacted from this. Thank you.
And that's why I would like to see someone from the hospital board here when we do this budget in open session. Because I was expressed my opinion that I'm concerned about the patients that are going to Watch now, making sure that they do get the health care, and if the hospital is not going to do it, who is? Because if Watch can do services, medical care for a third less, for 1/3 of the cost of the emergency room, at some point in time, the taxpayer's going to end up paying for it if they go to the emergency room through increased room rates and medical services at the hospital. So the taxpayer's going to foot the bill one way or the other.
Well, I think that's why Joe is making the comment he's making is if they can do it for 1/3 of the cost, then in all likelihood, the hospital's gonna pick it up.
I want the hospital to come and tell us that they are going to do that.
I don't think you're gonna have that.
Because what we're talking about here is just because it's legally right doesn't mean it's morally right. We're looking at people's health and their well-being. And I want to make sure that these people are going to get the services needed because, for example, what about if a person is working 2 jobs and maybe even has Obamacare? If they go to the emergency room, the deductibles are so high and the co-pays are so high, who's going to pay for it anyway if they go to the emergency room? The question is that and I think there's a legitimate question here. Does indigent care include people that have insurance coverage even though they can't afford it under Obamacare? That's the question. So I want to make sure from my standpoint and my view is that the hospital is going to fund it. Why wouldn't they? But the key is that why don't they join us in coming together on this and put this to bed and move forward? That's my question.
It would be nice.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pate.
As you know, my dad was a physician. He practiced medicine in Northern Wayne County for 45 years or so. He swore an oath when he was in medical school that he would treat anyone, and he did. Now, I think the medical profession needs to go back and remember the oath that they took and make sure these people receive medical attention as needed. My dad never got a penny from the county, never asked for any. Of course, he was an old country doctor, and perhaps we as his kids suffered some. We didn't get as much money as a lot of doctors' kids did, but it's because of his dedication. And I hope that the medical profession, again, will reach back and remember what they swore to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, my concern is that you all have been in discussions with the hospital, and from a legal standpoint, I think we're basing all this on the agreement that was put together that said that they would do what they were supposed to do, and that would be it. So I'm basing my thoughts on what the legal aspect is, and we certainly want to make sure that every person in Wayne County is medically taken care of, but under the auspices of what the legal agreement is.
Right.
So
And that's what this is based on.
I think it's important to note that what the manager has told you, you've got a responsibility for public education. You do not have a legal responsibility for law.
well, and I think that's exactly an appropriate position to take. And and as a commissioner who's not been in the negotiation table, my position is we're going on what has been legally determined by our attorney and the thorough investigation of this by our county manager. And so anyone else who has different opinions, they certainly need to look at the agreements and then work from that standpoint.
And it's been said, we have a legal obligation to fund the school system. And I think everyone on this board knows the school system has not had any extra revenue in several years from the county. And I feel like that, if the law states that we're obligated to fund the school system, when you have to meet your obligations sometimes, other agencies or other things may have to suffer some of the consequence. And it's not that we're trying to pick on any particular agency. The fact is that we're falling behind in Wayne County in funding educating our children. And I think this shows that we're moving in the right direction. It's just unfortunate that, if you fund one thing that is mandated, something else may have to suffer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I probably better just go ahead and take an opportunity to make a comment about this while we're talking about the school system. I'm glad to see that we're making some arrangements to give the school system some added revenue. But by the same token, I want the school system to remember that the employees that they have who go to ball games and so forth need to be paid for the time they spend working those ball games. No one works for free. When you're at a ball game, the deputy's getting paid, the referee's getting paid, and teachers come back after hours to work ball games for free. And the way they wind up doing that is grandparents and so forth keep their children for free, and they go back and work ball games for free. So I'm glad to see that the school system is getting some added revenue, but I would also want them to be cognizant of the fact that every employee needs to get paid for the hours that they spend. So we're looking at fairness and we're looking at responsibilities.
And Mr. Camardi, I agree with you 100%. But we've got to keep in mind, we fund the school system, but we can't.
And I absolutely agree with that, but I won't back down from the fact that I think what's right is right. That's just like anything else we're dealing with. We fund our vote to give folk authorities to spend money, so I won't back down from that position.
Thank
Well,
you.
the point is that I'm not against this. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that we also have a responsibility to the citizens of Wayne County to make any way possible. And I know that the hospital board is separate and all this, but the bottom line is, are we concerned at all about? I want to see the hospital step up to the plate and say, we're going to fund Watch, because I don't know this for a fact. I don't know if we can ever find it out. But there could be some people working in the school system that's going to Watch. We don't know. But what I'm saying is that the hospital needs to join us and say, yes, we're going to fund Watch. It's going to save the taxpayer money if they do fund Watch. If the figures that we've seen from Watch, their health care costs, is 2/3 cheaper than the emergency room, it makes sense to the taxpayer and everybody concerned that the hospital continues to fund Watch. That's my only question that I have. We are responsible for health care for all of our citizens, not just part of them. And if we're going to work together with the hospital board, and we're going to continue to send our inmates to the hospital for health care, we should be a part of coming together. So
One final thing, I would like reinforce.
One more comment, and then we've hashed this out enough.
I would just like to commend Mr. Mayo's position on that whole business of fairness. I think what you're talking about, Mr. Mayo, is fairness across the board, and it is our responsibility to try to make sure we ensure that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Item 16.
Okay. Item 16 is the Will Sullivan Building housing state adult probation officers has some major issues and should be replaced. In addition, it does not afford the necessary privacy to the staff and their parolees to conduct business. The Facilities Committee is in the process of determining the best course of action for this building, as well as the rented offices used for juvenile probation, which y'all know is the Purser building, I think, about 3 blocks away. Funding will have to be determined after this study is complete. Number 17, the Department of Social Services and the Public Health Department share the county office building on Ash Street. Both are in need of expansion. The DSS is also housed in 3 of the 6 floors in the Borden building downtown, along with East Point. East Point's lease with the county will expire on June 30th, 2016. My recommendation to you is to notify East Point in June 2015 that we do not intend to extend the lease. That will give us 3 floors containing 48 offices for the DSS department, which already occupies half of the building. The Health Department has had a space needs assessment done, and a committee of the Health Board is making field trips to other counties to see their facilities. The Facilities Committee is in the process of determining the actual square footage needed by both departments and where any additional needed space would be built. The obvious location is the campus of the Health Department, where several smaller buildings and part of the parking lot could be removed to accommodate it. Number 18, the county continues to have a major infiltration and inflow problem with the Genoa sewer system. We have made good progress during fiscal year 2015, but more work is needed to correct the problem. And again, we'll discuss that in more depth under the sewer fund. The only contingency is reserved to fund the employee merit raises and job classifications discussed above. That means any changes to the budget during the fiscal year will have to be taken from unassigned, unappropriated fund balance. This is a conservative approach. It's the same one we used this year, as it does not appropriate a pot of money to be used for unnamed projects. I believe that instills more fiscal discipline on all of us to amend the budget only as absolutely necessary. Number 20, we've actually already talked about that before. We don't know the full impact of the state's budget and won't know it before you end up voting on this. But the best we can do is what we continue to do, and that's monitor the state budget through the NCACC and voice our concerns to the General Assembly regarding any moves to either reduce our revenue streams or to increase unfunded mandates on counties. Number 21 is in a separate document. We've prepared an updated capital improvements program. It plans the capital outlay for the county over the next 5 years. The first year contains those capital items that have been included in the fiscal year 2016 budget. I encourage you to review that planning document very closely, and we'll go over it briefly this morning. And before we move on to the individual funds, I do want to state what's in this conclusion. That is, I do want to thank our key staff members. They're listed in here in putting this together, and all the department heads, because everybody has done a good job in preparing their budgets and going through that with our budget team. And I particularly want to thank Assistant County Manager Tommy Burns and also Finance Director Pam Holt and their staffs. They've done a great job on it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest maybe we take a 5-minute break.
I'm gonna say 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. All right. And then we'll come back and get into the details.